At all events, he said that the true motivator for practical ethical conduct is belief. Similarly, when it comes to teaching values, well, you'll find that you teach values, but values will come into conflict. There might be a value to honor a parent, but at the same time there can be another moral imperative which conflicts with that. How should we reconcile it? Once again, it's belief systems which harmonize conflicts amongst values. And finally, he made the point that whilst democracy is the great merit of protecting individual rights and accommodating individual minority positions, at the same time, democracy is not the source of values. Values, we come to values from home traditions, from belief traditions. So this issue of belief as something which is actually going to produce the, if you like, the cement of social cohesion, that values are not something which can be purveyed abstractly or generally, that they need a value foundation. They need a sense of, if you like, the consciousness of standing before God, or standing before conscience, or standing before something higher than intellect, higher than presence. This is an argument which has been brought forward for the dissemination precisely of the religious foundation of the Noahide laws. Do you have any comments on this?
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that there's a lot of truth to that, of course. The idea that you cannot, or at least it's very difficult to teach ethics in the abstract is certainly a valid notion. And here I would draw upon the Jewish tradition of education, which begins with teaching two things: the history of the people and the law of the people. It does not try to teach abstract values and abstract ideals and abstract ethics. Children enter into the literature of ethical behavior by studying the law, by analyzing the law, what interests is the law intended to protect, how does the law function, by examining conflicts in the law, as the example you gave before, or many others, where different values come into conflict with each other, and how are these conflicts to be resolved? What did earlier generations have to say about those very same problems? What new light can our generation bring to bear on those kinds of problems? So I would agree that an educational system should not be based upon the abstract teaching of values, but should be based upon something much more concrete. And I think here again, the use of the law, the use of the Noahide law, as a tool as an educational tool, is a very successful and an excellent tool for not only teaching knowledge, but involving children, and then later on as they become adults, in thinking about these problems and working out or trying to work out a resolution of some of these problems, brings them to a commitment to the values that the law reflects and represents.
I would like to amplify that point by saying that the Noahide laws do not require humanity, in a sense, to, so to speak, to turn over the traces completely of their own traditions. Rather, the Noahide laws represent, if you like, the common historical unconsciousness or consciousness of the world traditions themselves. And I found that in my own work with a distinguished interfaith committee in Victoria, Australia, which was convened precisely to respond to very radical social legislation, that when we together looked into our various and collective traditions, we found agreement. We found that our own traditions had brought forth fundamental values, and that the biggest problem now is the actual rupture of tradition. That we are, if we go and if we seek out the common denominator, and we, if you like, allow ourselves also to be tutored somewhat by the actual transmitted knowledge of the Noahide laws as a way of focusing that common denominator belief, then we are actually taken back to something which we already have. And this is the concept of tradition and belief, of spiritual transmission, cultural transmissions. This again is something which is bigger than the human being. It takes us back again to that which Kennedy said when he said, let us turn back to the hearts and minds of human beings to establish peace. And the hearts and minds of human beings are in fact informed ultimately, and in the great majority, by religious traditions. And those religious traditions have a common root. And that's why one of the most fruitful activities of interfaith activity is actually together to locate and to affirm that common root morality, which is the Noahide laws.
To come back to the idea that you mentioned about abstracting values in contrary of realism. For example, the verse of the Bible that it's very well known is love your brother as yourself. ואהבת לרעך כמוך. There are religions in the world that this is the motto of their religion. In our understanding, in the Talmud, it is said that this is the basic of the whole Torah, of the all commandments. But the Jewish tradition understands that it should be translated to actual behavior. For example, if I may cite an English judge that said that what is the source of the obligation of a man not to harm others, not to injure others, the basis of this commandment is the biblical verse, love your brother as yourself. There are Jewish scholars, earlier Jewish scholars, that said the same. Love your brother as yourself means do only things that you like that others will do to you. Of course, to harm others is not among them. This is a good example how an abstractic idea is translated to actual behavior. There are many such other concepts as for the modern legal system that we say we know that everyone has the right to be heard before the court. You can't decide upon somebody's situation unless you hear what he has to say. There was also an English judge that said, what is the source of this obligation or to the right of a man to be heard? This is from the Bible, because God, when he wanted to punish Cain because of the murder of Abel, he said, where are you? He started with an question to let him be heard. The same is with Sodom and Gomorrah. When he wanted to punish them, he first said, let's go down and see what happened, to be close to people and to let them express their views. Those are the basic values of from the